right, everybody, welcome to Are They Out There? It's been a little bit of time, but we had the holidays and everything. And Stuart, I hope you had a great Christmas and New Year's Eve with the family.
It was not bad.
Well, that's
It
good.
was not
That's
bad at
better than
all.
saying it was bad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. No, it was not bad at
Yeah.
all.
And before we get started, everybody, as usual, you can get a hold of us at Are They Out There, the number one at gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts and everything. You know, um, Before we get started on the Apollo moon landings, fake or real here tonight, did you catch the video that I sent you of my boy out there at Loch Ness?
I have not got to look at it yet, but it's yeah, I just got it like not too long ago.
Dude, I love him. And next our next broadcast, I'm going to have it to where we can show it.
Yeah,
These guys that I know, they actually were in Scotland, and he went to the Loch Ness. He drove like 4 hours out of his way to go
yeah.
out to Loch Ness. He was like, it was cold, it was getting dark, and everything. But yeah, I love him,
Hmm.
and it's kind of a funny video because my boy is stiff, but I love him to death, man. Love
Yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, so we decided tonight we were going to talk about the Apollo moon landings, man. Fake or real?
Yeah.
I mean, what's your opinion?
I think they're real. I think that I I've kind of questioned whether the video itself was real. I think we still went there. I just think that exposure to radiation, you know what I mean? All the tapes, and then certain things have been lost, and they can't find. You know what I mean? There's a lot of I don't know, a lot of stuff that surrounds it. But no, I absolutely believe that we've been to the moon. You
Right.
know what I mean?
No, and
I just don't know if
I believe we went there too. I mean, there were some videos out there I think were taken out of context from a couple of astronauts where they were like, "Oh yeah, they admitted that they never went there. It was all done in a studio." Like Buzz Aldrin
yeah,
had made a comment. I think he was talking to like some kids or whatever, and
yeah,
he was like, "Of course they couldn't have filmed it because And then they used that portion. And what he was talking
uh-huh,
about, they had to animate everything because I mean there were no
yeah,
cameras watching the lander land, and then the question came up, well, how did they film him walking down the ladder, right? I mean, do you
yeah.
know how they did that?
How?
So on the lander, they hit a switch and a door popped open that had the camera pointing at the ladder. In later
Uh-huh,
days, that compartment got bigger and bigger and bigger because they housed the lunar rover in
yeah,
a huge compartment on the side of the lunar lander. But the
yeah,
camera was in basically an arm that when they pulled the cord, it dropped down and just started filming.
yeah,
And that's why the quality sucked because it was so
yeah.
bad.
Well, I mean, even still, I mean, it's just like that thing had to this equipment, especially back then, had to be 100% like able to just extreme different temperatures, like whether it's hot, it's cold, you know what I mean? And then you had a bunch of other stuff that kind of just the condensation, or I guess yeah, from the travel. I mean, everything just turns to
Right.
ice when you're up there,
Right. And
in the free
and a
falls of
lot of people
space.
yeah, and a lot of people talk about that, how they survive in the cold. Well, they rotated the capsule on their way to keep portions
Yeah,
of it pointed toward the sun,
yeah.
equally. I mean, uh, a lot of people have you heard of the Van Allen radiation belts?
Um, yeah, I have, but remind me.
So what it is, so there's a belt of radiation between us and the moon, right? And
Uh-huh.
people say that there is no way that you can survive the Van Allen radiation belts. It'll kill you, right? You'll get radiation
Hmm.
poisoning, all of that. I mean, it's like sending millions of rads of X-rays through your body, right?
Yeah,
And that was one that got me a while back, and I was like, you know what? They're right. How would you survive that? So I started reading up on this and stuff, and it came down to a pretty easy principle. You send them through the thinnest part of the radiation belt at the fastest
yeah,
speed that you can attain, right?
yeah,
And it's all about math.
yeah.
The math is there, the speed versus this, you know what I mean? And I am no mathematician. I hated it in high school. But
Yeah.
once they laid it all out in science and mathematics, and you look at it, you go, okay, it's plausible. They can do it that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that the conspirators say. Have you seen like Neil Armstrong's spacesuit at the National Air and Space Museum or any photos of it?
Yeah.
Okay, have you noticed his boots?
Um, I know. I guess I would have been young. I would have been probably like in fifth grade when I saw it.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
his spacesuit, right, that he wore on the moon, his boots are flat. They're not ridged on the boots, right? And everybody
Oh,
goes, that's proof. That's proof right there that he couldn't have made the footprints, right?
yeah.
How do you feel about that with me telling you that?
I think that there's also they could have had like inserts on their boots. You know what I
You're
mean?
exactly
They could have
right,
had
man.
like
They
clip.
wore covers
Yeah. Yeah. You
because
could
they
have had
weren't.
covers. They could have looked at the moon surface and been like, oh well, hey, let's put on this because they weren't even sure with the moon the way that was that if they weren't going to just sink right through. They weren't sure if it was going to be like quicksand. They had no
Exactly.
idea, you know.
Yeah.
And so
And
yeah, like it,
yeah, so it was absolutely they wore covers and a couple other things. One of the other things was too because of weight and everything, right? Because they were bringing moon rocks back. So, weight when they landed versus weight when they
mhm,
take off, right? So they
yep,
ditched a bunch of stuff from the lunar module,
yeah,
including their air packs and all of that.
yeah,
And that was another thing on the conspiracies. Are like, well, if they opened the porch door, how did they breathe then without their space packs? And I'm like,
hmm,
Jesus, people, they wear space suits inside the lunar module that is hooked up to internal oxygen,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
It's like,
hmm,
some people just they don't want to see both sides of it. They find one thing, man, and they point it out, and they're like, God damn it, there's the proof right there, you
yeah.
know?
I mean, and also they have airlocks. You know what I mean? They have different airlocks, like where yeah, I mean, they could also yeah, and also their spacesuits like could have wore that, and they had a hose hooked up to
That's
that. You
exactly
know what
right.
I mean?
And that's
Yeah,
what they did. That was their internal oxygen,
yeah,
right? They opened the little door. They
mhm,
threw out their backpacks. They threw out a bunch of stuff. They threw out their poop. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Oh,
Type of
that's
thing.
kind of crazy. So there's shit on the moon, huh?
There's shit on the moon, man.
There's human
There
shit
is.
on the moon. I like it. Yeah.
Yep, we have left
Oh
some
man.
garbage on the moon, brother. We have left some garbage there. So,
Yeah.
and here's another one. And this one it always gets me too is they talk about the shadows in the photos.
Uh-huh.
They're all not parallel, like they're all not straight. They're all not lined up. You see shadows doing this and you know what I mean in different directions. Have
Yeah.
you seen that?
Yeah, but I mean that easily can be kind of described just like the way that they're kind of like rotating around the sun. You know what I mean? Like the moon and the sun and everything, like the rotation. Because they landed like right on the fucking right where you could go over to the dark side of the moon and right where it's light, right? It was a Sea of Tranquility. It was the first one where
Right.
they landed.
Yeah, Sea of
And
Tranquility
then
was
like
Apollo 11.
yeah, and then like they had basically essentially what had happened was that they were like they almost didn't make it. Like they literally ran out of fuel as they
Mhm.
touched down. They were
Yep.
completely out. And he had to was it Neil Armstrong? He had to basically take over. He had to like
Yes.
the computer wasn't figuring it out, and so he had to
Mhm.
manually fly. And then where they were gonna originally land was massive amounts of boulders. So they had to fly over onto another section of it and land.
Yep.
And it was just like three, two, one, and then they touched down, and then they actually were out of fuel right
Right.
there.
So here's an interesting fact that I learned about all of that. And what you were talking about when Buzz or not Buzz, but Neil took over was they kept getting I forget what the alarm was called, but it was basically the computer was being overloaded by the radar, and they had to keep
Oh,
resetting it, and they had to keep
gotcha.
pushing that button to reset it on that. But right before the lander lands, because everybody's like, with all that thrust, why didn't it create a crater? Right?
Yeah.
There's at one certain point of I forget how many feet it is above the surface, the actual main engine cuts off. So they basically that last little portion, they just drift down. And it's not
Yeah,
a huge portion, but it's not, the engine's not firing into the dirt and creating a massive crater.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they
yeah.
have an
No, and
engine
that's
cutoff right before it actually touches down. And I didn't know that until
yeah, yeah,
recently. I started reading up on all of this because sometimes I get drugged down the rabbit hole with these conspiracies, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's
yeah,
a good. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
yeah,
Let's start reading about this instead of believing an old man with a freaking leaf blower and a pile of rocks. You know?
yeah. Well, I was thinking about this though too. Is like, so let's say, because how they had the cameras that they were using way back then. Yeah, I mean, it was obviously like it had just it was almost like the old school how you take a picture. It had film. And I've always thought about this is like, okay, with that film and whatnot, like, wouldn't the radiation, kind of the exposure from out there, wouldn't that just completely destroy all the fucking film?
Huh?
You know what I
That's
mean?
a
Because
good
that's
point. You know,
when that's
and
yeah, they're not doing they weren't doing digital. That's the only reason why I'm just like, That's the only that gives me like I believe, like I said, I believe we went to the moon. I just think that yeah, it's a possibility that was created in
and and the
Hollywood.
radiation part would be through the Van Allen belts. That's where it would have done
Yeah,
any of the damage.
well,
Um, because
yeah,
on the moon,
but
they only have to worry about like the solar flares of radiation when that happens.
yeah, 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 and
And
that's yeah, 100%.
and a lot of people are like, well, how would they survive that in a tinfoil lander? Well, the thing is, they're surrounded by water in the sides and fuel, liquid fuel,
Oh.
and
Well, I didn't know that.
water and fuel. The density of it is what absorbs the radiation and protects them. So I mean,
Unreal.
yeah, and they're like, even if let's say they were away from the lander, if they found a cave, which nobody's found a cave on the moon yet, right? Or
Yeah,
but depending on which direction the flare was coming from, at the moon, hiding behind big
yeah,
boulders, actually, the radiation would go around the boulders on
yeah,
that,
yeah. No, and that's another
protecting
thing.
them
Yeah,
that way.
and I always just kind of sit there and think. I mean, like the just the scariness of space is just unparalleled. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like it is just absolutely insane how many ways you can die up there. And
No
how much
shit,
shit out
right?
there is cosmically violent. I
Right.
mean, like just quasars, and you have like suns imploding. You got black holes. You have, like I said, radiation flying all over the place. Solar flares. You got, I mean, there's like some suns. There's like this one sun that is just unbelievably huge. Like where this thing is just, we could not even fathom how big this goddamn thing is. I want to
Right.
say it's like 1,000 I want to say it's like 1,000 Jupiters. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like this thing is just, but it's a sun. Can you imagine that? Like you could be how many light years away do you think you could be and still get like a sunburn?
God, who
You
knows
know?
on that one? And the
I
kicker
mean,
about our sun
we're
is
well,
so many times,
we're 8.5 light minutes. We're 8.5 light minutes from our sun,
right?
right? And on a bad day, you can get blistered.
Well, hell yeah, you can. And we're protected
Yeah.
by ozone layer,
Hmm.
and some of the
Uh-huh.
magnetic field and all of that. So we
Hmm.
have these things in place to protect our Earth from that, and we still get
Yep.
burned. You're absolutely right
Yep.
with that. And what
Yeah.
people don't understand is there's going to be a day that the Earth is gone because the
Uh-huh.
sun is dying. It is a dying star, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah. No,
and
not
all of
gonna,
a
yeah,
sudden,
it's gonna grow.
yeah, and people
It's
don't
gonna it's gonna
understand
grow
that
to a
yet.
certain point. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
gonna grow
that's
to a
why we're in
certain point and
space.
yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's gonna grow to a certain point and it's gonna be so hot here that it's gonna flash boil the oceans. The oceans will evaporate. And this will become a dead planet. You know what I mean? And then pretty soon the sun will expand large enough and it'll actually consume the earth. You know what
Yeah,
I
and then
mean?
it'll
And just
just
before
poof, it'll be done.
mhm, yeah,
Yeah,
collapse on
yeah,
itself. Well, they say it like this that no matter what, that all this eventually is going to end. You know what I mean? Like the solar system supposedly supposed to have been around for like 9 billion years before we started figuring some shit out. Like Earth's been around for like 4 billion, or maybe our sun's 9 billion. I think our sun is 9 billion years old. Earth is 4 billion, and yeah, I mean that's just like that's so weird. Even like dinosaurs lived 65 million years ago.
Right.
Million. You know what I mean? And so, and then, well, what you got to think to yourself is what we started flying like in like 1910, 1912. And then we went to the moon, landed on 1969 is when we landed on the
Right.
moon. So, I mean, that's a
Alive.
pretty crazy, like, yeah, that's a very fast, like, we'd only been flying for 50 years, you know what I mean?
Right.
And yeah, we
Yeah.
were able to fucking get to the moon. That's insane.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you start thinking about, I mean, well, you think about this, that your iPhone that you're using right now has more power and thinking
Yeah.
power in it than the Apollo command module. I mean, that's
Hmm.
crazy. And to think everything in the command module and the lunar module were analog switches, nothing digital. The only thing
Nope.
digital, I think, were the number readouts,
Yeah.
that you punched into the little computer boards that they saw.
So everything else was a switch.
Was a switch, yeah. I mean, hell, that's what
Yeah,
happened to
that is
Apollo
crazy.
13, man. Threw the switch for the
Yep.
heater to heat the oxygen tank, sparked and blew up, you know?
Yeah, I know. And that's a crazy story in itself.
Right? So here's
Yeah.
another one. Because there's a couple
Uh,
other things I want to get into that are a little bit beyond Apollo. But
yeah.
what about Starfields not in the pictures? What do you
Starfield. You know what? I just think that they kind of are drowned it out. You know what I mean? By the cameras that they were using and whatnot. And yeah, it could have been like for anything from like I said, like the film. You know what I mean? It could have been like something that they were using as far as like to capture certain light, or just didn't.
ex-
I don't know. Just like
you hit it right on the nose there. The
yeah,
aperture
yeah.
settings, because of the brightness of the sun reflecting off the regolith, which is the
Hmm.
moon soil, which is very reflective and bright, right? Makes everything bright. The aperture
Hmm.
setting, and so it's like click, click, really fast. To catch the
Yeah,
stars, it has to open for a couple seconds and close. That's how you
yeah.
catch clear star fields. So, like, if
Uh,
you, in the other thing to think of is if you go to a bright, like you're in the city and you look up, like New York, you won't see any
uh-huh.
stars because of the city
Yeah, yeah,
light,
yeah.
because it's so
Uh-huh. Oh
bright.
yeah.
You can't see the stars, right?
Drowns
That's
it
why they
out.
tell
Yep.
you go to the country. You want to see the meteor
Yeah.
showers. Get out of the city, right? Well, that's the same there
Yeah.
because it's so reflective off of the soil of the moon that it's so bright that the apertures it was just
Yeah.
click click click. So yeah, so I mean, all of these things that these conspiracy guys are saying, it, God, man, to be honest with you, they're kind of a bunch of assholes, and they're probably all flat earthers. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, dude,
I'm probably going
God.
to get some
Yeah.
shit for that, but and here's
Oh
another
yeah.
one too.
Well,
They were like, "Why isn't there any pictures of Neil Armstrong on the moon besides
mhm.
the footage from the camera that was on the side of the
Do you
lander?"
want me to tell you why? Someone
Go
has to
ahead.
take the goddamn pictures. Someone has
You're
to take the
exactly right.
goddamn pictures.
There was only
Yeah.
one camera, and it was on Armstrong's chest. And the only
Yeah.
picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon is Buzz Aldrin is saluting the flag, and in his visor, you see Neil Armstrong standing there with the camera that's
Yeah.
hooked to his chest.
Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, which is just
That's
funnier than
crazy.
hell.
I mean, I couldn't even imagine that. Like getting off. Well, hey, what is your thought about the secret Apollo missions?
So that's I was going to get to that, and let's start.
Yeah.
Let's stay with Apollo 11, just real quick,
Yeah.
because for 15 minutes they switched to quote the
The
medical
medical channel.
channel, and a
Hmm.
ham radio operator picked it up, and I couldn't find the conversation out
Well,
there.
essentially what he says is like, like, hey, we're being watched. Yeah, they're here.
That's right,
They're watching us. And then also he talks about how like, yeah, there's like there's vehicles.
right.
I mean, but he's
So
talking about he distinctly says they are watching us.
so
Yeah.
and Buzz Aldrin said on the way to the moon they had saw something that was like keeping parallel to the Apollo spacecraft, but they didn't want to report anything to NASA because NASA would have turned them around, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they kept closed about that. So yeah, so I think the Sea of Tranquility. I think NASA, at that time our lunar orbiters and photographs didn't show much, but I really believe that they all thought something was on the moon, which brings us to Apollo 18 is what you're probably going for.
Yeah,
18 through
yeah,
20,
that one.
right?
Or yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that they have like the secret, the secret moon landings when they went back up there. And essentially, the reason why we haven't gone back is we basically got told like, get the fuck off here. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, can you imagine if there were aliens, living on the dark side of the moon or on the moon, and they see these humans just show up and just start leaving shit bags like on the fucking surface of the moon? They'd be like, what are these guys doing? But then
Right.
that's another thing too. But I'm sorry, but the like, I know the whole thing, and people think like the moon's like a ship. You know what I mean? Like, there's like a bunch of stuff like where the moon, like certain things are like throughout history and like old, I guess, in old records that they talk about how the moon showed up one day. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like that there wasn't a moon for the longest time. So yeah, I don't know. But you would think that there'd be something. You know what I mean? And especially with
Right.
the technology that we have today, like people can look at the goddamn like telescopes can look on the surface of the moon. They would see something.
Right. You know, so this brings me to like that Indian lander that landed on the dark side of the moon with the little
Yeah.
rover, and then it lasted what, 8 hours? I think it was something like that. It didn't
Yep.
last very long. Like, and it's dead now, right?
Yeah.
So if there are beings on the moon, did
Yeah.
they take a look at that and go, hey, fuckers, and
Yeah.
destroyed it, right?
Well, I mean, I think it was something about like the batteries, like
And the
something had
temperature,
happened where
right?
yeah, we're basically like with the temperatures. I think it was something about the temperature and the lack of sunlight, and they thought they would have a
Right.
lot longer time, but it just chewed right through their batteries, and they didn't.
Right.
I don't even think they got very much done with that thing either. I think
No,
it, I
no.
think it only worked for like a few hours, and then it like the 8 hour mark. What you're talking about is that it like it was still responding. It was still like, but they couldn't do much. Like it was like,
Right. And then it just stopped. But here's my thing though,
yeah, then
right?
completely.
Here's my thing. These motherfuckers are smart enough to put this all together and land it, right? A nice soft
Yeah.
landing and all of that. They know the conditions that they're going to, right?
Hmm.
Do you put an aftermarket battery in it, or do you put the damn Duracell in it with the rabbit? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I
That's what
and
you
there's
see what I'm saying
well, so
here?
there's this. Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. No, but there's this one like crazy story. So I was going to get my engineering degree. I was talking with one of my professors, and she told me about a time that essentially the European Space Agency and NASA they did a co-op mission. You know what I mean? And it was basically like one person built this, one person built that, slammed it together, and this thing fucking basically just disintegrates on takeoff. And what was happened was is that essentially how that we use a different metric system than they do. You
Right?
know what I mean? Well, they didn't convert it.
They didn't
They
do the
didn't like,
convert.
and so one was using this size, one was using that size, and then they didn't convert it. They just kind of put the plans as is. And the head of NASA, he just puts it down. He says, "I am speechless." You know what I mean? And he basically pushes it back over to them, and was pretty much
Right?
just like, just that's all he said. It's like, "I'm speechless." Like, you guys are fucking supposed to be the smartest people on the goddamn planet, and you guys forgot to take in consideration the fact that we use a different way of
Right?
measuring things. Yeah, but so I don't know.
All right. So here's another one for you.
Hmm.
Recently, they've been recording earthquakes or tremors on the moon. Now the
Uh-huh.
moon is dead.
Uh-huh.
So how are we
Well,
having
okay. Check this
tremors?
out. Like, so what's so crazy about it is that like so on Earth, how it happens is that like the older rock is on the inside, of the planet, right? It's sunk down there. As you go towards the core, it gets older. On the moon, it's the exact opposite. All the old rocks up top, and
Right?
all like young rock is then below, right? And then so they have a whole thing like when the lunar module landed on the moon for 11, they said that it actually rang. That there was a ringing sound for 10 minutes. And then on later ones, they actually hit the moon harder. Like you're talking about where they had the cutoff, they went
Right.
higher and higher and higher. And then like one of the times that the moon, and they recorded it for 2 hours ringing. So that would basically mean that there had to have been a hollow spot, or at least a large portion of it has to have a ball of some open cavern has to be there, right?
Right.
And so if they're recording earthquakes, maybe it's just like things like settling. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy for me because I mean, for an earthquake here, it's the plates are shifting and
The
causing
tectonic
all
plates,
the
yeah,
rumble.
because
Yeah.
we're essentially floating, like, you have your nickel. So everything when the Earth was made, you know what I mean, like all the heavy elements sunk through because it was still like, it was like molten, you know what I mean? Like this place was like pretty much on fire. And then we went through that cooling period and whatnot, but all of the nickel and everything kind of formed at the center, you
Right.
know what I mean? 'Cause it got pulled in through centrifugal, like gravity. It's basically like sucked in, just kind of how it's same difference like when you're making uranium, you know what I mean? Like you take the really, really heavy particles and you get rid of all the other shit, and then
Right.
and then when you enrich it, it's because it's pulling all the heavy shit into its center and then getting rid of all the other crap, and then you want to use the enriched stuff. So back to, uh, what they do say as far as like that, like with the moon, that it has a lot of the same stuff. So what they believe is that when our universe was still, when our galaxy was first made, there was a planet that was kind of like close to us, and it just came by and skimmed it. Like it didn't do a direct impact, but it had enough to rip off a large
Right.
chunk. That's why, yeah, well, that's what they say. Like, the rocks and everything, they have a lot of the same makeup as Earth does. So it's
Right.
not as the celestial body would make sense that it came from us, or at least it was there during the like there during the
Everything was
when the moon
forming.
was formed was about the same time as when the Earth was forming.
Right.
They would have been made out of the same shit that was kind of floating around.
Right. But for me, the one side of the moon always faces Earth. So
Yeah,
the moon isn't rotating. It actually is still, but it just go, our Earth rotates, right?
yeah,
And it always
and the
faces
moon
us, right?
just
And so it's
yeah,
in our gravitational pull as we rotate and go around the sun, right? So it's
yep,
not spinning at all, so that
yeah,
for me, that's one of those ones like, okay, so this is where I'm going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. Maybe it's
yeah,
vibrations from whoever
yeah.
watching us that Apollo 11 saw, maybe
Yeah,
lifting off of the moon, maybe
could
landing
be.
on the moon, right? And setting off this seismic um, stuff
Yeah.
that
Or digging.
instruments or
I would
digging,
think that
drilling.
honestly, well, so China just figured out a way to essentially use the lunar dust as fuel. You know what I mean? And so I think like a glass of this stuff could like power like a city. You know what I
That's
mean? With the way that
crazy.
they have it, it's unbelievable. Yeah. So China, however they figured it out, I don't know why. They're not very innovative. So they usually do like, corporate espionage and steal shit. So
Right, right,
I don't, yeah, I remember just sitting there. I'm just like, who knows? But yeah, so they got, I don't, you'd think you would have to have something, you know what I mean? Because there's no buildings, no structures. And I
right.
would think that, yeah, like, digging, if you found a cave, being able to use like, what you have available. And like even in Mars, like, get there and have a driller and then go underneath the ground, you know what I mean? And that set up like a base camp from down deep inside. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I think that would be probably the smartest thing to do.
Absolutely. So, moving
Mhm.
on from all of this, like where, uh, the possibility of Apollo 18 through 20 actually flew, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh, the latest thing that I heard was um, uh, the telescope, the newest telescope, space telescope that we have, that is better than Hubble by leaps and leaps and
Yeah, what
bounds.
is it? What is it? It's the kibble? No, it's the kite.
I,
No,
I can't remember. I don't know
I
if
know
it's
what
like
you're
the
talking.
Marshall or something. Anyways, it's out there,
No,
right?
no, yeah, I forgot the name. I think it's like I know it's named after this I think the dude who invented it, but essentially it's further out past like, past a certain point, so it's able to get. They're actually going to build one that's going to rotate around, like it's going to go around the moon, and so it'll
Right.
take pictures when it's behind the moon from the dark side. I mean, so that way there'll be like none of that, like the sun's light or anything like that will be drowning anything out, and it'll be able
Right.
to actually fucking.
Well,
It'll be kind of cool.
this one telescope got pictures, and I think it's
Kepler,
like
Kepler,
Kepler. I think you're right. I think it's Kepler.
Kepler.
Yeah. And it it detected light on another planet.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah, and I forget if it was like
like
7 million light years or whatever away from us, but it detected light emitting from
like
the planet.
okay. I mean, is
L-
that like a constant light or like a flash?
Constant. It they
Oh
said it was
wow.
like the lights of a city.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Have they started
yeah.
shooting? Have they started shooting lasers at that thing yet?
I don't know. I don't know. I need to read more up
Yeah.
on that. I
Well,
had just caught that the other day.
to send a transmission like to fucking like to Mars, you know what I mean? Like a signal, like there and back, like takes hours. I
Wow.
think it's a half hour. Maybe you have to look that up, but it's not an easy task. You know what I mean? Like there's a delay,
Right.
especially in shit. So you'd have to have something like, I mean, yeah, just to be able to beam a message all the way back, it's going to take an ungodly amount of time to just to get there, unless you have maybe like buoys along the way, you know what I mean, that
Right.
can help, speed the transfer, you know what I mean? So you drop like a buoy like every light year or something like that,
Right.
and it's able to kind of fucking help that. I don't know. That'd be
No,
stupid.
no, I
Fun.
agree. You know, in
Mhm.
in thinking about that, you know, and getting a little off track with the UAP meetings lately and stuff like that, one of the congressmen came out and said that yes, we have like an aliens, you
Yeah,
know, I don't
I
want to
believe
say in
it.
custody or whatever, but after he came out of the UAP meeting, he's like, we have them, you know.
Yeah,
So I think these
yeah.
meetings will start opening up more with the congressional
Uh,
stuff, even though they're shooting them down.
I don't think I do. I think that. I think this is the whole thing. Well, we'll know here in a second. So on January 6th, right, Bloomberg came out with a report on China and how China's capability and readiness for if they were to go to war, and found out that they are not doing so hot. So they did a number of critical tests, like a number of their like lead generals have been relieved of command. Like there was they did like inspections on their arsenal, like their rockets,
Right.
found that a lot of their rockets had been drained of
And had
rocket
water
fuel and
replaced.
replaced
Yeah.
with had water placed in them. You know what I mean? And so like basically, you know what I mean? Like we always have to be cautious of of what China's doing. But like yeah, a lot of it like corruption I guess is really really just rampant right now. So
Right.
like they're talking about like the readiness of China and having a bunch of generals in the back pocket. I think we're not gonna. I don't think we're gonna see anything from them for a while. Like they're gonna have a
Right.
couple years where they have to root out this, root out the spies, and they're gonna have to. I mean, at best, like order other parts, refuel the rockets, get all the shit kind of taken care of, squared away. And I mean, yeah, I don't think they're in any position. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. You know what I mean? I
Well,
think a lot of the UAP stuff is just to fucking kind of get them scared.
you think so?
Yeah, yeah. I think that, like we always say, like people like are stupid or whatnot, but I mean, some of them are not. You know what I mean? And what better way to carry the lie than to have Rush, which is like, why would you have him do that? Like, why would you have him go and start looking around? You know what I mean? To find shit. It's like almost like you sent him on a wild goose chase, and in turn, you take a dude who you know is autistic, and like, this feels like OCD compelled to do the truth, to do the right thing,
Right.
and you give him a bunch of stuff. He has one of our highest top secret security clearances. He is the guy who you would believe that
Right.
anybody, he's not some crackpot. He has this, he has, all the accolades that say he's a super soldier. And then you go ahead and have him spill it unbeknownst, like he's not doing it on purpose. This is what he was told, this is what he believes. You know what I mean? And but they just kind of did it all just to scare the shit out of the Russians and the Chinese.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, you got a good point there. Um, and you heard that the whistleblower on the UAPs, he was supposed to go on Joe Rogan and then
Yeah.
backed out because of he supposedly was receiving death threats and security
Hmm.
reasons and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's hype. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's just
Yeah.
hype.
Well, right now also they have this one dude who he God, Jeremy something. Anyway, but he has been like essentially, saying that he has all these cameras and all this excuse me, all these things that prove UAPs and whatnot, and he's been really radio silent. Well, it's because he has a Netflix special coming out. You know what I mean? Or no, like our TMZ special coming out.
Right.
It's a three-part series. You know what I mean? And then that one other dude, the guy fucking uh, what is this? He was the one who was in charge of ATIP. I know his name. I just don't want to butcher it. He has a book coming out. All these people, you know what I mean? And then like David Grush is like, well, this is career suicide, and it was this, was that, and yeah, 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 yeah. I'm like, he's like, I'm not making any money off it. I'm like yet, like, dude,
Right.
people are gonna be fucking hitting him up for books. People are gonna be hitting him up for the rest of his life on the certain shit that he's fucking kind of seen and whatnot. And
Right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember him talking. He was saying something along the lines like, that people are like, why would they even, like let you go on and talk about some of this stuff? And he's like, well, if they do, and say like they have a problem with something, they have to basically like department such and such has a problem with you saying this, so you can't say that. And so they would have to acknowledge, what I mean, that they didn't want him talking about it and what department didn't want him talking about it.
Right.
So in turn, that's why they were like, okay, you can go on and you can do this, say whatever you want to fucking say. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, and he still can't say anything, really.
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean? That
So,
kind of goes back to the whole Apollo thing, why we didn't, quote, go back to the moon after 17,
yeah, yeah.
because they don't want us
Hmm.
back, you know? So it's going to be interesting, that the lander that we just launched that now all of a sudden had the fuel problem and won't be able to
Yeah.
land on the moon, and they're going to turn it around and bring it back to Earth and burn it up in the atmosphere. It's going to piss a lot of Star Trek fans off because, dude, uh, they had Gene Roddenberry, some of his ashes on there, man. They had Scotty's ashes, O'Hara's ashes
Oh,
on there.
wow.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of ashes on board there of stars, and especially like Star Trek folk who passed away. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and they were going to land them on the moon. And it's interesting, speaking of that, like this, all the Star Trek folk who have died, they've put them on a bunch of different rockets and sent them out into space. Did you know that?
Oh, wow. No, I
Yeah,
didn't. That's
yeah.
crazy. I'd be like, fuck no,
So
I don't want to go out into space. You
right,
know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, fuck no, keep me here. But, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I don't, man, I think that, they are going to block everything, anything and everything. And I think that's just going to take somebody who, well, sorry, Lou Elizondo was the guy's name from ATIP. But
oh
again,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
all these people have secret security clearances. You know what I mean? All of them. Also, like, I don't think that they understood quite how much it was going to affect their lives. You know what I mean? I think they're starting to now. And I think that that also is a ploy of them, you know what I mean, to really discourage anybody from coming forward. You know what I mean? Like, why would you give up your $150,000 a year job? You have great benefits and you're going to retire. You know what I
Right.
mean? It makes
Yeah,
zero sense. But I mean,
and
I
talking
would
about
love.
him, he walked away from it. I mean, he walked
Yeah.
away from it,
Hmm.
you know.
Walked away
Um,
from it, and then yeah,
well, and once he walked away, he started doing the shows and stuff like that.
yeah.
And
I don't
you
think
kind
I
of
would. Well, I would.
you wouldn't walk away.
I wouldn't walk away.
That's
No.
awesome.
If I knew, like, I don't know, if I really knew who had, the aliens and whatnot, I mean, like, what do you do? But at the same point in time, I really believe that, like, I think as a society, we're fine. We can handle it now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I
No,
really,
I
really
agree.
do. And I don't think that people really give a shit, to tell you the truth. I think that if anything, like, it'll start to piss people off that they're not coming down. You know what I mean? But also somebody,
Right.
like, I was listening to somebody talk about this, and it's like, if you're walking past, an ant pile, you know what I mean? You don't sit down at the ants and be like, how can I communicate with this thing? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's an ant, and you're like, what the hell is this thing doing? And I mean, that, like, we're just some violent, just absolutely just narcissistic, crazy SOBs, you know what I mean? Like, do you think an
Right.
alien civilization, they're just like, oh my God, I mean, what if we're just like reality TV to them? You know what I
You
mean? Where they
know
just
what?
sit
Could
there
be.
and, yeah, yeah, they just go to all the war zones and they're just like, oh, like these people, these things are fucking brutal to each other. Look,
Right.
they have,
But
yeah, they use
maybe they
fucking
do a little
chemicals.
influence to change it to make it more exciting for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about that. They're like these chemical compositions to fucking hurl metal projectiles at fucking, lightning speed
Right.
at them. And so, it tears their fleshy bodies open. Yeah, I mean, and their red substance just bleeds everywhere. Yeah, like
Right.
I can only imagine what they're like, the aliens just the first time they come to planet Earth are just like, oh my God,
Right.
you
What did we
know?
get ourselves into?
Yeah, oh
With
yeah,
what you're saying about like we can handle it now or whatever, because we
yeah,
don't have like Orson Welles doing War of the Worlds on the radio because
yeah,
then they didn't have the TV and it was all theater
yeah.
of the mind.
Well, that,
I say release the shit from Apollo 11, release that 15 minutes of tape. Let the
yeah,
people
well,
hear
yeah.
it, you know?
Yeah, no, and on top, yeah, absolutely. But then, you have like essentially, I feel it's, it's a lot has changed. You know what I mean? Way back when, I remember when they had like this one guy got Jimmy Carter to admit that he lusted over another woman aside from his wife. So basically saying that he found another woman attractive, and that was like a
Right.
huge like skating. He almost lost the election, or he almost, you know what I mean? Like people are just like,
Right.
you know what I mean? And now we have presidents that are thumping porn stars and,
Right.
making fun of people with, with disabilities, but don't give a shit. People are like,
Right.
whatever, like,
Exactly now, yeah. But and speaking
uh,
of Jimmy Carter, he actually admitted to seeing a UFO.
yeah, actually a number of U.S. presidents. But then, it's even crazier, right? Is so Trump, when he was bluntly asked, he's like, "Do you think there's UFOs?" He's like, "I don't think so." He's like, "No." He's like, there's stuff up there that is definitely like not us." He's like, "But I don't think that they're alien." Which you're like, hmm. I think he's going on the concept that it's like us, coming back into like, in the future.
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah,
and
and then like,
I saw Barack Obama on a talk show too, and they asked,
yep.
I think every president gets asked about the whole fucking UFO thing.
Oh yeah,
And
oh
they
yeah.
asked me bluntly, can you talk about it? And I think it was like, God, who
He's
was
like,
it?
nope.
Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, he just laughed his ass off at him and was like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no, I can't. But then he
it,
was like saying that he thinks that he's like, there is stuff up there that we do not know what it is.
right. And you know who I thought would spill the beans about it was
Who, Trump?
Bush. No, Bush.
Oh,
I thought
I don't
Bush
know. I don't
after the
think.
presidency, because he's like, he's one of those good old boys. He's going back to his roots a little bit, and you know,
Yeah,
hitting it a little
yeah,
bit after his presidency. And I figured he might
yeah.
slip up and be the one. You know,
Yeah. I don't know. I thought Trump was gonna actually might have been the one to do it, but I think that honestly, because I know that like Mattis and like what was that one? Milley. Like they
right,
heard about like there were times that they knew that there was like Chinese spy balloons or shit was flying overhead, but they didn't tell Trump. They were like, Don't tell him."
no,
You know what I mean? Because like they'll fucking shoot it down. Like they were just terrified of what he would fucking do. Because
right,
there's times I guess where there was like he had ordered strikes on like on countries that it would have been like, oh, you're taking us to war. You know what I
right,
mean? And then like when they were about 10 minutes before they were about to hit the package, and he'd call it off. Yeah, I mean, so there's multiple times, like that's one of the things that makes him so great is that nobody knows what he is going to do. And if you know, like, he's the type of dude that will. And honestly, we need it. We need this type in there. So I'm not taking anything away from it. But yeah, we need that unpredictable, like just like you don't know quite what this guy. I mean, it's kind of like having a lion for a pet. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's domesticated. It's been around you since it was a cub, but it's still a fucking lion. You
Right.
know what I mean? It can
But
still decide one day just to be like,
but you know what we need? We need that quiet lion though, right?
yeah, hey, it was
That
quiet. It was quiet on Trump. It was. You know what I
you know,
mean? Like nobody wanted to fuck with him. In fact, I remember when, yeah, when Obama, told Trump, he was like, the greatest opposition right now to like the United States is facing is North Korea. And then within 2 years, Trump's shaking hands and stepping into North Korea without, any Secret Service.
right.
Stepped over the border, you know what I mean? Stepped over and shook his hand. I mean, granted, there was like Reaper drones and AC-130 gunships
Shit, right,
probably
right.
circling overhead. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, all sorts
Yeah.
of crazy ass shit. But
Yeah, 100 Marine snipers laying in the grass.
oh, dude, just ready to fucking rip, dude. Yeah, like, oh, dude, yeah, you know it too. And I couldn't even imagine the absolute shitstorm that would befall upon any country that I said, oh, it
you
would be
know,
so bad. Oh,
and I know we're getting a
but
little
here's
off
the thing,
task here, but my
yeah,
president man was Reagan.
yeah, Reagan was cool too, man. I
But what
fucking
I
great speeches, man.
and I think what I liked was the behind the scenes of Nancy Reagan, especially
That
when
too.
he was starting the Alzheimer's was kicking in, you know,
Yeah.
and she kept
Hmm.
him on that straight path right up until the end. Because I mean, if you
Yeah.
think about it,
Yeah.
right after his presidency, man, he had the library and stuff, but he kind of just went out of the spotlight because of the Alzheimer's. I mean, she kept him right
Yeah.
to the end. But you're right, the
Yeah.
speeches and his cowboy-esque attitude, and yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Oh yeah, I
yeah,
know. And then like, but I don't understand this though too. Is like so after like Apollos and whatnot. I guess because the only thing that reason why it would be worth going back to the moon now is, they essentially they have to make a base on the moon.
yes, they
I
do.
mean, it has to be where they have a livable facility where they can stay up there and, I mean, they can, if something happens, they can get in a fucking shit and fly back. You know what I mean?
Right.
There has to be that.
Well,
Obviously,
they were talking about building being able to make the rocket fuel there, and because the atmosphere isn't as dense as ours, getting a ship off of there toward Mars or any other place so much easier and cost effective because we don't have
yep,
to get the speed and the power to get it through
yep,
our
yep,
atmosphere to break away from the pull,
yep.
the
Well,
gravity.
that's just it. Yeah. So they'll have like something that floats. Like they're basically going to start building shit that's going to start orbiting, the
Right.
moon. But yeah, they can do
Like a
that
gas
up there.
station, basically, a refueling
Yeah.
station.
Well, yeah, yeah. And then, well, they also have like through the makeup and when they brought all the rocks back and they've examined everything from the moon rocks, they can find there's water. There's water somewhere there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now where it's at, they don't know. They can't find the rivers. They can't find this, but they do know because of the chemical makeup of the rocks and the dust and just the general, like just the landscape, that there's
Right.
water there. And if you take water and you do a couple other things with it, you know what I mean? Like you get basically rocket fuel, you know what I mean? A
Right.
type of a fuel for a propulsion. And so, like
Right.
you said, yes, they could go and they could carry a buttload of it and they could start going to Mars. You know what I mean?
Right. And then it
Especially
was
if they're able to do the
hydrogen
same
was the
stuff.
big thing.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
hydrogen that
Yeah.
was
And
the
then
big
like
thing.
so yeah. And that's yeah. And then so but you could have that technology like the Chinese had with, a spoonful or a cupful of stuff, Power City, and you take that to Mars. And then you just have like you just send one after the other, just boom, boom, boom.
Right.
And then yeah, you have a fuel source. And who
And then
knows what
maybe
the
one.
heck's I mean, and also
Oh
yeah,
no, go
they've
ahead,
got
man. Go
water
ahead.
on Mars too. Yeah, they've got
No,
water
go.
on Mars too, you know what I mean? So Like, I don't know. I think, but then also it would be really kind of cool too. Is they're gonna start? I think they're gonna start mining on the moon. I know
Oh
that they
yeah,
have actually like yeah, they're trying to get it passed right now is mining rights for the moon.
right,
And it's like I think it's
yeah,
on internet. I think it's for like they have to go to obviously international like court or law. But yeah.
right. Well, a long time ago there was a guy who was selling like little plots on the moon, right?
Oh.
I forget if it was like 10 or 15 bucks. I think I bought one back in the day. I was like, yeah, I'll own part of the moon. I don't give a shit, right? But you're
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
right.
they're
Like,
gonna
okay,
fight for
cool.
mining rights, especially on Mars. There's a
Oh
show
yeah.
out there called All Mankind on Apple TV.
Uh-huh.
And it kind of
Yeah.
plays a reverse of the Russians beating us to the moon, but it
Yeah.
goes along what we're talking about, where they find water, they develop bases on the moon, and then they go to
Uh-huh.
Mars, right?
Oh, okay.
And develop a base on Mars, and now it's kind of like a NATO base and stuff. But it's like it starts with Apollo, right? The Apollo
Yeah.
mission, and how just a twist on it, how the Russians beat us there instead of us getting there
Yeah.
first. But a lot of that, I mean, when you look at the science that they're using it in this show, and I know it's a TV show, but it's kind of along the lines we're talking: the base, making the water, habitation,
Mm-hmm.
growing fruits and vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
for sustainability and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's pretty interesting, and getting they kind of use like the Elon Musk's thing. I forget what the guy's called, but he's like the Elon Musk of the show, developing the rockets,
Yeah.
get us to Mars and got us to Mars on the show. So, they use a little bit
Yep.
of reality mixed in with, a TV show, but it does go along the lines of what we're talking about with having to make a base and having to make fuel and having to, have people there for long periods of time to be able to do this,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but as we come to the end here, I mean, both of us
Yeah.
agree Apollo moon landing's real, right? I mean, everything
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
be explained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
anybody out there that wants to disagree with us, send us some emails. We can talk about it, in
Yeah.
another show at
Be
some time
more than
down
happy to
the take a look.
be
Try to
more than
figure it
happy
out.
to yeah. And I want to let everybody know, like I didn't talk with Gary before this. So like all those questions he asked me were, like I just was able to explain them just like logically. Like, well, okay, well, this is what would have
Right.
had to have happened.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean?
for
So
everybody to know, you and I haven't really spoke since before Christmas. I mean, we
yeah,
kind of
no,
shut
no.
down with our families and stuff for about 3 weeks there, at least.
Yeah, no, yep,
So,
yep. We just
absolutely. And, the other thing too, I need to explain real quick. We've had a lot of technical difficulties and learning all about this podcasting. Our last show has not got out on YouTube yet, and I apologize for that. But
yep.
I'm gonna get that one out this week because the guy's finally back from his vacations and his freaking ice fishing and stuff, and then we'll get this one rolled out just a little bit after it. So when you see
Yep.
these two podcasts close together, that's what happens. I apologize for that. And again, you want to question us about anything that we ever talk about, are they out there at the number one at gmail.com? More than happy to answer those questions. So, Stuart, I appreciate you joining me
Absolutely.
again, man. And we'll
Absolutely, man.
we'll hit another subject matter and maybe go a little deeper into something else here in the next
I
week
love
or
it.
two. All right, brother.
Yep,
You
I
have a
love it.
good one. Everybody
All
out
right,
there,
man.
have a good one as well.